What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with another Warhammer Combat Cards Warlord guide. The practice pays off. And tonight we're going to go ahead and talk about the new, updated Inquisitor Greyfax. And this is really great because my Greyfax guide is one that was fairly outdated. It's one that I wanted to do anyway because I did it in a different format than the other two, or than the other 40. And also she just got a complete rework. So it is pretty funny. It's hilarious, actually, how consistent it is that every time any piece is nerfed, anytime there's a balance change that makes something weaker, there's this sudden uproar that suddenly this thing is totally unplayable and utterly useless, which is exactly what's happened with Greyfax 2. But she did get a nerf to her ability, and I'll talk about that in just a second here. But it's pretty funny that usually it's something that was so insanely overpowered that it needed to be toned down, and balancing it actually makes it just fine. But it looks so much worse on paper that people just stop playing it and don't touch it for a while. So if you are a Greyfax diehard, you're going to appreciate this video. If you hated Greyfax the whole time, you'll be happy about this video because we're going to talk about how she was nerfed. And if you're somewhere in the between, maybe this is helpful. So we're going to talk about the original ability really briefly, and we'll look at the rework too. So the original ability was for every 5 unspent deck points, you would get a 5% buff to all of your card stats in the deck. So that's every attack type, your range, psychic, and melee damage, and your health, which is bananas. And it was a max of 75. So if you left 125 deck points unspent, you would get a plus 75% bonus to every single card in the deck, including Greyfax herself, who has not insignificant stats that get dramatically buffed, which also stacks with Inspiring Presence. So she was real good. And so with you, I believe to get max bonus before, and I may have just said this, but so you would leave 125 deck points unspent, which would leave you about, let's see, 32, if my math is correct, about 32, once you subtract her total cost too. But where that became a real big problem was that gave her significant health. If you have high level fear and a couple healthier cards in there, even if you had like a 50 or 60% buff, it was really hard to chew through, especially for new players. And because of the way Greyfax decks are built, where they are smaller and don't use as many deck points, the deck building would tend to match up really scary Greyfax decks with newer players who had weaker decks. It was a really challenging wall that people struggled with. And the single biggest dramatic change you're going to see here, the damage is still probably going to be good, but that durability and the hit points are dramatically reduced. And one of the reasons I say that is I just mentioned that the bonus stats do stack with Inspiring Presence to fill in that difference there. So if a lot of these decks run Inspiring Presence, they're going to actually do more damage than older Greyfax decks did before. But they won't have the same number of hit points. So this does actually make Metacay a little bit better, and I was pretty down on Metacay with Greyfax before. But also does make Inspiring Presence better, but generally is just going to make Greyfax decks less durable, but they still will probably be able to put out a similar punch. So offensively, they're still pretty good. So the balance is good, and that should really help new players get past that Greyfax wall. And just to talk about it, they're about to roll out, we'll just jump out of this real quick, the Apocalypse mode, which we'll see what that means. We'll see what the exact details are for that soon. But the long and the short of it, the one thing that we do absolutely know is it's going to be competitive, may or may not be a ladder, we don't know. And it's going to be a 400 deck point mode, so double the usual, intended to use your big scary super heavies and such, so that's going to be something. And in that mode, anytime there's a campaign or synced PvP that was max level and you had a 400 point deck mode, Greyfax's old ability where you only had to leave 125 deck points unspent gets phenomenally powerful when instead of having, 50 or 40 some, 30, 40 some points left over to spend, you instead have closer to like almost 200. You were able to play with a lot of points in that 400 point deck mode. So Greyfax's ability has been changed, so it's percent based. For every 5% unused deck points, each friendly card receives a 5% buff to all stats when it's deployed up to a max of 75%. Max is the same. The 5% buff is the same. What you get to trigger each buff is different. So I will have the actual numbers in the description of this just so you can quick reference them, and just for me. So I did the math on this. But for standard play, that means that for every, so the standard being the 200 deck point mode, for every 10 points you leave unspent, you'll get a 5% buff. And now that again will mean you have to leave 150 points unspent to get that maximum 75%, which is a lot, especially since Greyfax herself takes 43. So that leaves you with exactly seven points to spend if you want to get bodyguards to play a deck, and it has to be a legal deck, so it has to have at least 2 bodyguards. Now you can do that. You can actually still run a max level Greyfax deck and 200 points in standard if you run a 3 and a 4 point bodyguard, which you can do. You can throw in an endless and then the barrage 3 point. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So if you just run this girl here and this guy here, then you have a max 75% bonus Greyfax deck, which makes Greyfax herself terrifying, but it is a god-awful deck. But you can do it, and that's the thing. Where before I was able to have these two and Greyfax together for max bonus in all 3, and it was kind of a hilarious deck that did better than it should have. But yeah, so there's that. So, and then that's the 200, so you have 7 points to spend, and every 10 points gives you the plus 5%. If we talk about 400 points, the Apocalypse mode, you just double that. So you need to leave 300 unspent deck points, and it's 20 points unspent per 5% bonus. But you do actually get significantly more points to spend because Greyfax's value doesn't double. So you actually get 57 points to spend at 400 points to get the max bonus. Now that's still only 57 points to spend on bodyguards, so it's extremely low and is going to make it very challenging to go for that max bonus. But you can still run a very decent deck. And so I'm going to jump right in and do some ladder play with my personal favorite deck. I have tweaked this a little bit. So it's the 3 area effect psychers that do psionic blast that blast the table. This one I just got to level 9, thing of beauty. So this is definitely level dependent, but that's one of the things too, where the strong Greyfax decks are still the ones where you have high level cards, where lower and medium level cards will be much weaker. And lower to medium level Greyfax decks will now be much weaker as well, which again is good. This is a good change. Now the way I used to have this, I had a couple other psychers in there. I think I sometimes ran her. And then for my Inspiring Presence, I had this guy. Now I had to trim the points down a bit to get within that 80 point range. And remember that I said it's every 10 points you leave unspent. So if you don't spend 9, there's no reason not to spend those last 9 because it doesn't give you any bonus. It's only specifically at the 10 point mark. So this is iffy. I'm tempted actually to put in a 13 or a 11 point card just so that I can actually get that extra 5% bonus. Now 5% isn't a lot, but it's something to think about. And one of the things here, the reason I do have Inspiring Presence in there still is that I do want to make sure that I'm amplifying those attack types, and I do want to have a deck that has at least a couple cards to put in there so it's not too thin. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And I'll talk through it a little bit more while I'm playing my games here. Now, one thing I really want to highlight is Greyfax is doing just fine in the ladder with this build. Oh, look at that. Ooh, mirror match. This is going to be good. So let's see what they're running. Thank you, Warcat, for indulging me. That is terrific. It's a thin deck, so okay. All right, so, and I'm going to check and see what, 60%, wow. All right, so that, doing the math again, that's 10 for 5. The math is not good. We'll see what else is in there. I did the math earlier with a calculator, wrote it down, so I could do it for this thing. I'm not doing that math on the fly. And you do have a third, yeah. And so with the deck that I built, I have a lower bonus than this. My bonus is 40%, but I probably have more powerful cards. Yeah, I do have more powerful cards. And that just splattered across. Look at how much damage that did. And I didn't even attack yet. And I mean, I could still win this, but it's pretty unlikely. Yeah, this is still an extremely strong deck, and this mirror match I will win comfortably. And our cards are roughly the same level. Mine's a couple levels higher, but not much. And it's important to note that and just to see how powerful these cards still are. And it's the first week of the ladder, so I will be seeing a mix of fairly low-ranked decks, but then also I'll be seeing the decks that are starting, that were 3K at the end of the season, but then changed down. So I'll be seeing some of those, and so I've actually seen some pretty nasty games. So that was one. I'm going to do one more. If they're all as quick as that one, I'll do 2 more. We'll see. Go away. There we go. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight what the change is, how the points work out. Ooh, Akaran, yeah. Good. So what the change was, what the points were, what they are now, and then kind of highlight that it's definitely not useless, not a done deal. This is an extraordinarily strong Warlord still, and very, very effective. And this should be a good test, because we're looking at relatively scary cards here. Now, they're under-leveled compared to mine, but not hugely. And it's a much bigger deck than mine, and they all have those second lives. So this is a decent test to see how this performs. And this is one of those things where I always try stuff on paper, or I always sort of speculate on paper, but then I really like to see it in-game to actually get a true sense of how it works. Maybe it works as well as I think it will, maybe it doesn't. Usually it does not, but this time it appears that it will, which is great. This card is just so good, especially like 126 base psychic damage when I have that Inspiring Presence on the table. Yeah, this is going to be an absolutely crushing defeat. And again, I am over-leveled here, but I didn't lose a single card. I did a full Akaran deck, and I did not take a single loss at all. And this guy's going to die before I even get my turn. It's still very good. You're going to have some worse matchups. It's going to be harder to succeed, and may have a lower ceiling, but I still think that Greyfax has a lot of life there. And I have talked at times about momentum decks that you want to complete games quickly, ideally win games quickly, but just have those moments so that... Thinking. I'm not sure if my recording paused, but my game has certainly paused. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So we'll do one more because those are both very quick. I talk about momentum decks where you have decks that complete games very quickly and, again, ideally win. And those do let you progress up the ladder very quickly. And this deck definitely is that, if nothing else. And then I could get high up with Servants and switch to Canoness. But I'm going to keep tweaking and playing with the Greyfax to see how it goes. And I'm just waiting. Okay, so all of the decks I'm running into are fairly lower leveled than mine. That's also part of the beauty of Greyfax. I mentioned the matchmaking. It's a black box. We don't know exactly what goes into it. But some of the things that we do know is that if your deck has lower deck points, you will tend to get more favorable matchups. If you have fewer cards, those are both two distinctive markers of a lower player level to where you don't have a full deck. You don't have full deck points. So you don't have full slots or full deck points. And so the matchmaking will tend to give you easier matchups if you play as Greyfax, and you will also see Greyfax more when you are lower leveled, which is a bummer. So a lot of the matchups I'm getting now are probably softballs, but ooh. Yeah, I still got this. And this is AI still doesn't play Darkstrider's ability correctly. That would be hard to program. But again, I haven't lost a card yet. I do not think I will. Yeah, there we go. So, the rumors of Greyfax's meta uselessness are greatly exaggerated. We'll see just what the ceiling is, but she's still a really powerful Warlord. And one of the key things to think there is this: you're not going to see like 60-70% bonus as often. Right now I'm kind of pushing this pretty aggressively by running a deck that's a 60% bonus because I do leave a lot of points on the table. I could easily go down to a 50, excuse me, am I running a 40% bonus? Hang on, let me check that. Ooh, Eldrad, ooh, good. Watch him be really high level. No, okay, all right, we'll see. Yeah, 40%. So this is only a 40% boost, and it's still really good. Like, it's funny that Greyfax seems a lot worse because we knew what she was before. If you were to take any other Warlord, drop a Warlord into the game, be like, all of your cards get a plus 30% buff to attack stats and health, I think everybody would be jumping for joy about how good that is. And yeah, there are downsides, of course, but still. Yeah, and one thing to mention here, too, is that Greyfax has been sort of a meta challenge for a long time. The developers have put a lot of work into trying to balance her out and make her sort of make sense. And she was in a pretty good shape in the latter after the latest couple changes before this one. She was pretty good. I don't remember seeing anywhere near as many complaints, and things were okay. And that's because her stats got dialed down a little bit and her cost was rocketed through the roof. After this balance change, I fully expect at some point, not too far down the road, we're going to see another balance update where her points go down at least once, so she gets cheaper. Because now she can be cheaper because it's that much harder to get her max bonus. And I think she's going to underperform a little bit of where she was, and so she can safely be reduced in cost a little bit without completely breaking the game. So that was, what, 4 games through in record time. Hopefully this helped kind of understand Greyfax a little bit. Just to go ahead and touch on it, so I like the Pure Psychers. Very, very powerful, very lean deck, and you really lean on one of the most powerful cards in the game, being that heavy fear, potentially Psionic Blast Psyker in the Culexus Assassin. But to talk about a couple other cards that really stand out as being extremely powerful, I'm going to talk about a couple that probably aren't anymore, because I'm going to start at the more expensive end of the spectrum. These guys you would sometimes see in Greyfax decks in the sort of normal ladder. You still can, especially this one, but that's so many points. Like, you put this card in there, you're already not getting max bonus from that card alone. But even if you get like a 20% stats bonus on this thing, it's pretty freaking great. So that guy, a cheap Inspiring Presence, it could actually have some legs here. But of course, Celestine with that Endless ability where both lives of her get that trigger is really, really good. This one, though, is one I want to be sure to bring up. This guy is very good basically all the time, and then once you get him up to decent level, giving this guy like a 20 to 30% buff to his stats is really good. And especially if you have that Inspiring Presence, he can help kind of add that while also having meaningful stats in both melee and psychic, or ranged and melee, excuse me. He's one definitely consider. And then as we go up, I'm very quickly going to move out of this because these are quite expensive. Of course, our buddy here just got a buff in the latest balance patch. This guy for the durability of regen is a great one. Anything with shields is pretty good. Hix is quite cheap and already hits like a truck. So if you go a melee heavy Greyfax, he's a great one to consider. You can see how I could do this deck as melee, like replace this guy with Hix and already have shaved a couple points off, and then have some other melee pieces a couple points cheaper here. I could bump this up to a 50% or better just by switching to light melee. This guy is extremely good. I really like this one, especially once you get to that level 3 regen. Especially in a Greyfax deck. This was a staple of one of my more ranged or mixed heavy Greyfax decks. That regen on top of the really good ranged attack and really good hit points for the cost, phenomenal piece. Great one to consider putting in there. Of course, the target acquired is a good one. Let's blah, 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 blah. Taunt, always good because it takes extra hits. But I've talked about this a lot. The scariest Greyfax decks I've ever seen, the ones that just completely wreck my face, are the ones that rely on the last chancers. So any combination of these 5, or even all 5 of them together, gives you a very balanced deck that does every single thing you could want, except Inspiring Presence. What do we got here? Yeah, you got target acquired, you got fear, nope, outflank. You've got taunt, you've got fear, and you've got barrage. So they have melee stats, but they're more directed towards ranged. They're all quite cheap. And then this guy, of course, you can throw in there too. Gaunt, yeah. No, it's Gaunt's Ghosts. I'm sorry, they're not the last chancers. They're Gaunt's Ghosts. Excuse me, I should know that. But those guys together, like, they're very good for the points. You can take all of them and still have an okay bonus that just makes it a very cool thematic deck. And that's a very powerful piece that I've seen. I have personally been smacked around by that one, so that's definitely one to consider too. Then you get into the budget pieces, and you look at this guy. This guy's stats are ridiculous for 11 points. So you can do a very melee-heavy Greyfax that's built around him, and just chainsaw through opposing decks fairly quickly. Likewise, her, if you want to go range and have that shield, they have to get through the shields and then get through her bonus health while taking the bonus damage on that. So she's a very good cheap piece. And we're not going to talk too much about it beyond that. Just because these guys are all good. Like, these guys are shockingly good if you give them like a 40% buff to their stats. Because that is a 40% buff to their hit points on both lives, and a dramatic increase to their offensive output. Like, you can do a budget range deck that leans on both these guys, and it's very hard for opponents to chew through. And then throw in these two in there too, and you have a surprising punch for an absolute budget. So, yeah. Anyway, certainly worth considering. The 400-point deck mode is where it's going to be really fun to play around, because, again, you can still have your max bonus if you spend as few as 57 points. And then, of course, you actually have quite a few over that you can still spend and get a very meaningful bonus as well. So, there we go. I'll go ahead and call it there. Pretty exciting times. I'm very excited to see what kind of modifiers we get for that Apocalypse mode. And, yeah, to try it out. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful. My old Greyfax guide will still be up. I'll have it linked in the description of this video. But I will remove it from the general playlist. So, yeah. Holler if I missed anything. Holler if there's anything else you'd like to see. Until next time.